Hello, and welcome to Hot Take number 2, or the Heart of the Teachings. So, for this one, we're getting into the practice section of the passages on the Pure Land Way. So again, you can follow along if you go to Shinran Works and search for the passages on the Pure Land Way, going down to the practice section. So, a little bit recapping from the last one, we're now getting into the Bodhisattva vows that Bodhisattva Dharmakara made in order to become Amida Buddha. Shinran looks at these vows and among them picks certain ones that are very important that he thinks get into really the basis of the teaching. So, he starts out, the practice of the Pure Land Way is the great practice that embodies perfect benefiting of others. So this idea of benefiting others is important, of course, for Mahayana Buddhists, Buddhists who believe that the enlightenment of all beings is more important than the enlightenment of any one individual for themselves. So there's that aspect of it, but even more important for Shinran was that he believed that he was living at a time which was not possible to bring benefit to himself using his own power. This is based on this theory of different ages of the Dharma. So in the first one, known as the right Dharma age, there is the teachings, there's those who can practice correctly, and then those who have attained enlightenment as a result of those practices. So this would be like during the Buddha's time when he was able to teach people, and shortly afterwards, when he passed away, when there were still people who had known the teachings, had been around them, really understood them, and were able to pass them down correctly. So following that is the period which is called the semblance Dharma age, when there was the teaching, there was people who could practice them correctly, or what it looked like, but no one actually could attain enlightenment. So there was no enlightened ones, but there was people who resembled what was the right practice. Finally, in the last Dharma age, or the degenerate Dharma age, is when there was only the teaching, but no one could practice them correctly, and of course no one could attain enlightenment. So subscribing to this theory was Shinran, and there was his also own experience with personal failure. So he went to Mount Hiei as a child, and he practiced and studied for 20 years and did not feel that he made progress. And so with his own failings, as well as this understanding of the different Dharma ages, he believed that the reason why he could not get any progression was because he lived in a time when it just was not possible. So this is why it's very important for him to have the concept of Amida Buddha, this source that he could rely on when he could not rely on himself. So let's see, continuing with the passages in the Pure Land Way. It is revealed in the vow that all Buddhas praise the name, also known as the vow that all the Buddhas say the name. It may further be called the vow of the right act, which is Amida's directing of virtue for our going forth. So this is a reference to the 17th vow. When Bodhisattva Dharmakara made the vows, he made 48 vows, which is generally accepted within the larger sutra. There are different versions of the sutra, different versions that have different number of vows, but for our purposes, we're going with the one with the 48 vows. And in that is the 17th vow, which is, if, when I attain Buddhahood, innumerable Buddhas in the land of the 10 quarters should not all praise and glorify my name, may I not attain perfect enlightenment. So all the vows are written in this kind of like backwards way, where if, when I attain Buddhahood, something should not happen, then may I not attain perfect enlightenment. And this one in particular is talking about all of the Buddhas praising and glorifying the name of Amida Buddha. So because in this sutra it says that all the Buddhas praise and glorify the name, then for Shinran this is another form of evidence that the Nembutsu practice is the most important and the best practice. So continuing, he goes, Amida's directing a virtue to beings through the power of the primal vow has two aspects. The aspect for our going forth to the Pure Land, and the aspect for our return to this world. Regarding the aspect for going forth, there is great practice, there is pure Shinji. So there's two aspects of the vow which are important that Shinran gets into, and one of them is us going forth to the Pure Land and to our return to this world. So right now with the practice, he's trying to break down the going forth aspect. So this is important and very unique to Shinran's point of view, because essentially Shinran flips the script on the traditional understanding of practice. So generally within Buddhist studies and understanding, the practice is done by the practitioner, right? By the Buddhist, who tries very hard to reach some kind of level of awakening with the ultimate goal being enlightenment. However, for Shinran, he understood that it was impossible for him to get any kind of benefit, to make any kind of practice, true practice, and so he had to rely completely on Amida Buddha. And it's Amida Buddha that is practicing for our sake, not for his own. So Shinran quotes another sutra, not in the Passage of the Pure Land way, but in the Kyogyo Shincho, he quotes another sutra. Those with minds incapable of the constant practice of giving, those impoverished, I will save universally and relieve of all suffering. I will benefit the world, bringing peace and happiness. As the one supremely able, I will perform and fulfill all practices. To those impoverished, I will be a hidden treasure store. Carrying all good acts to perfect completion, I will be unrivaled. Among the multitudes, I will preach with a lion's roar. So here, the sutra that Shinran is quoting is the voice of Amida Buddha, and in his voice, he's saying that he will benefit the world, bringing peace and happiness, and fulfilling all practices for those who are impoverished spiritually, those with the minds incapable of constant practice. So because people are unable to practice the circumstances of this world and of course the blind passions of every person, Amida Buddha has decided to reach all of these people through his own practice, and that is the whole purpose of him creating the Pure Land and sending out the teaching. So going back to the passage in the Pure Land way, Shinran says, the great practice is to say the name of the Tathagata of unhindered light. So now we are really getting into the core of it, which is the 18th or primal vow, which states, if, when I attain Buddhahood, sentient beings in the lands of the 10 quarters, who sincerely and joyfully entrust themselves to me, desire to be born in my land and call my name even 10 times, should not be born there, may I not attain perfect enlightenment. Excluded, however, are those who commit the 5 gravest offenses and abuse the right Dharma. So now going back to the passages in the Pure Land way, this practice, comprehensively encompassing all practices, is perfect and most rapid in bringing them to fullness. For this reason, it is called great practice. Saying the name, then, breaks through all ignorance of sentient beings and readily brings all their aspirations to fulfillment. Saying the name is in itself mindfulness. Mindfulness is Nembutsu, and Nembutsu is Namu Amida Butsu. Okay, so going back a little bit, two things. Comprehensively encompassing all practices means that there's this virtue which is stored in the Nembutsu. So within the Buddhist teachings and the sutras, there's a lot of different practices which are recommended. And so, of course, with different schools of Buddhism, they emphasize different aspects of practice. And within the Nembutsu is encompassing all practices. So Shinran believes that in this Nembutsu practice, in the practice that Amida is directing toward us, there is the virtue of all of those different practices. So we don't have to worry about doing any of them. And then perfect and most rapid, bringing them to fullness, is it is quicker and it is quicker than the traditional way of reaching enlightenment. So not only does it contain all the practices making it the best, but it is also the quickest way. So again, traditionally within the Buddhist schools, there's many hours of practicing, of studying, of trying to understand and working through it. And for those people who are able to do it, it is of some benefit. But for the people who cannot do it, people who need a easier way, a quicker way, this is the quickest way. This is the best way to get that benefit. And it is directed by Amida Buddha. Going back to the passage in the Pure Land Way, the passage declaring the fulfillment of the vows in the larger sutra states, the Buddha Tathagatas throughout the 10 quarters, countless as the sands of the Ganges, are one in praising the majestic power and the virtues, inconceivably profound, of the Buddha of immeasurable life. All sentient beings, as they hear the name, realize even one thought moment of shinjin and joy, which is directed to them from Amida's sincere mind, and aspiring to be born in that land, they then attain birth and dwell in the stage of non-retrogression. So again, he's emphasizing this directing, this direction of the practice, which is coming from Amida's sincere mind, not from our sincere mind, because we are incapable of having a sincere mind. But to try to aspire to be born in that land and then to attain birth and dwell in the stage of non-retrogression. So this idea of a stage of non-retrogression is, in the theory of a bodhisattva, is that there's different levels of being a bodhisattva. So you start, at the bottom and you get up to these different levels. And there's one stage of non-retrogression, which means that no matter how much you fail, you'll never fall back past that level. So once you get there, then it's, kind of this checkpoint or something where you never fall back. So this is very important because it essentially guarantees that eventually you will attain enlightenment. Because if you're on the bodhisattva path and the end is enlightenment and you never go back, then somehow, some way, you're going to get to enlightenment. Back to the Pure Land, passage of the Pure Land Way. Further, the sutra states, the Buddha said to Maitreya, if there is a person who, having heard the name of that Buddha, leap and dance with joy, and say it even once, know that they receive the great benefit, that is, they acquire the unexcelled virtues. So Maitreya is the Buddha which is supposedly going to appear in the world and will be the last Buddha, and then will bring the end to this universe. But that's kind of maybe a different story or something. Either way, the Buddha is stating that any person who hears the name, leaps and dances with joy, and even says it once, they receive the great benefit. So a couple things here. One, this idea of hearing the name, which again, there's this change in directionality, because we think when we say the Nembutsu, it is us that's saying it, it's us that's practicing. But ultimately, when we say it, we're actually hearing the call of the Buddha. So there's this, again, kind of different change of understanding the practice, where when we say it, we're actually hearing. So Amida Buddha does not have a physical form. There is no mouth or lips that actually say it to us, but when we vocalize it, it's Amida Buddha speaking to us. There's also this aspect of dancing with joy, which is introduced, which we'll get into a little bit more, but there's this idea that someone who has truly received Shinjin is not only supposed to have faith, but also this kind of joy because of it. So maybe we'll stop here for today. When we come back, we'll talk about the second seventh master, and then we'll get into a little bit more, we'll start getting into Shinjin. Thanks again for tuning in to this episode of the Heart of the Teaching, the Hot Take. We'll continue next Tuesday. Please check out Wednesday's Dharma Dose in the evening, and then also the weekly memorial service on Saturday, and then our Sunday morning service. So the Saturday one's at 11 a.m. and the Sunday one's at 9:30 a.m. All right, thanks. Bye.